you very much for your interesting talk. It reminded me that I spent my youth in front of the Pantheon drinking beer in the evening when I was still a scholar. Another thing I noted is the people here with notebooks were heavily discussing on Twitter during your talk. And but I don't want to give them the first step. I want to ask the whole group, are there any questions from your side? Florian.
Just quickly to the last point, which you so nicely demonstrated. What do you have any proposals? What would be a better and more sustainable model for preserving the data?
My original proposal was an implementation of the project remains or of the project publication in a documentation format, similar perhaps something like DocBook or the Maven structure, a data structure or a documentation structure which does not impose any or the least technical efforts to the keeping institutions. So I would propose an XML format, an XML dialect, where you can store the project repository, the project's metadata, and which can be used to generate a project website or a project handbook and publication, and which can be given to a hosting institution which takes care simply of static XML, HTML, and data, pure data. That would be my approach from the perspective of sustainability and stability and long-term preservation strategy. The problem in fact is that we used with the Pantheon project a content management system with custom plugins. We chose the worst content management system imaginable. I have to say, well, it was against my advice, but we chose this tool, and now it's compromised, and don't know. Well, and there are not the means to keep it up, to bring it up, or don't know. It's not that difficult, but yeah.
Well, it's not only compromised, it's I have looked at the source code of your website, and there are many references to Cialis and Viagra, so it's even worse. But I would like to draw a difference between long-term availability and long-term preservation, because these are two different things. Preservation is more putting all the electronic stuff into an archive, closing it away, whereas availability wants to have the data all still online. I have found your website, well, at least a screen or a screenshot or a shot from 2008 in the Internet Archive, so one could discuss if the Internet Archive a possible way for the long-term availability, at least as a workaround when you don't have the resources to put your stuff re-online.
That was the idea, but I think if you design a project website which is used as a complementary for project publications, if the publishing journal does not have the opportunity to publish additional material in the sciences, it's not that problematic. I don't know what Nature will say when I say, well, I've got 2 gigabyte of measurement points accompanying my paper. There are perhaps restrictions, but I would say if you do such an approach as a project, you should care from the beginning what will happen to the project website after the project is over, and for a more principled view or from a more principled discussion, a project as the definition of project as a temporary organizational form. A project can't provide any guarantee for mid or long-term preservation or availability. So there must, I don't know who can enforce this, but there must be an enforcement that a project who builds up an infrastructure cares from the very first moment how the project will be kept up afterwards.
Very interesting point, and I thought that Mr. Furch wants to answer
something to this. I mean, politically, as far as classics go in Germany, this question more or less is resolved by the fact that BFG is supporting this Janus project at DEI for exactly that reason. We, as a DEI, tried to enforce it, by the way, in exchanging notes with BFG that come out now. If people want, at least in the area of excavation, if people want to do an excavation on BFG money, they get our questions to be answered. Where will your data go? How do you think, even in 10 years, for the first 10 years after your project is closed, your data will be kept available to. And by doing this, naturally, one would think logically that EFG on the other side provides exactly that tools, provides, the haven or some data center, and it indeed doesn't provide it right now, but Janus is a way to conceptualize that. On the other side, we know policies are changing, people are changing, people who enforce this inside of EFG probably opt out the other day from their job, and then policies of EFG also can change. But I think overall it's very clear, and also in the United States, Eric Kanzer told me that he made it into a group of 2 databases where NSF says any kind of, don't start to apply for money with us if you do not make clear that your data goes either to open context or to another product, so to say, and which is still there, which is already there. Janus isn't that way there, but I would say for the DEI cloud, for example, which is not the keeping online on all terms, but at least to secure and save the data until you can do something better with it. Janus, in a way, unofficially exists already. There is space and there is the policy to get any kind of data into, and there are a lot of, Felix is doing this, and there are a lot of questions also from abroad to use this.
Yeah, I think, well, yeah.
I don't know, in art history and in EVA, the discussion was kind of strange because people, try to come on with cheap talk about media theory, why you didn't have to say things, because we are I didn't understand in what kind of world we are living, but we are living in a way where, birth, existence, and death are natural, also in kinds of data, I know, but death sometimes can be really bad if it was too early or too unnecessary in that moment. And also the question, I agree with the view that you explained, that at least for the model, every kind of supporting data should be published. but philosophically, so to say, you should also publish the data that doesn't support your model and that you turn down in favor of your view, because somebody else can come to another point of view. And I think you meant that too. And specifically in archaeology, the Pantheon is there, okay. But normally we destroy everything that we are trying to come clear about. And so we have bitterly we have to strive bitterly to really save everything that we destroy before we destroy it, because we can't repair it what we do. And so we shouldn't have too many models and too many questions, but we should try to catch every kind of data that we have. And we should also, I mean, in archaeological excavations, for example, in the Samos excavation, which is a famous example for this, all the material that supports probably not the view of Ernst Buschor is gone in the publication. It's just missing. And you can point to the sections of the publication where now should come, this other thing, and it's just not there. And it's famous also in the Samos kind of, it's a sectarian group who is only they have their own Buschor priests who are allowed to say this, but they came clear about the fact that there was something went wrong there. And everybody sees that, and you can take the Samos publication from classical archaeology as the best example where, in an epical format, information has been destroyed, neglected, and not transported to the reader that was against, the views of Ernst Buschor about the chronology of those temples, which were some of the most central buildings in the history of ancient temple architecture, and that's really not a small thing.
What is interesting? And in fact, we tried with the Pantheon project and the Pantheon models is the idea to provide the user with interactive models of our interpretation, which allows the user to set the support points for himself and to check whether our interpretation, whether our localization of profiles makes sense to him or not. Unfortunately, the model is gone, but in principle, it should be understandable that this model, the fitting between our model or the parametrized model and the empirical data, which is not that empirical because all the radii are also calculated, but at least close to empirical, was an attempt to allow another interpretation where one can say, well, this circle segment simply does not fit. You see a fitting, but I'm not convinced.
Parametrical reconstruction of columns is the star case of including users just changing some numbers and get another clean image of columns. That's how it's meant to be, probably also in antiquity and also in Vasari. So now they think about that again and changing a little bit here and there. So that's a star case. And the model is not, or is it still there but it's not right?
The model is available. The whole repository is available. Is there, but is not accessible because the content management system is used for Cialis and Viagra advertisements.
But could you change this or what?
In principle, yes.
But
I don't have access to the machine because I'm no more member of the project. So.
And who's running the project?
Get Rasov.
That's interesting.
Well, maybe you should talk with them.
Maybe that could be a case for the test bed score.
I thought Janos would be an interesting for the Pantheon project and for the Pantheon model. I think Janos would be perhaps the safe haven for the project and for also for a sustainable solution for future research. There has been some research on the model. I don't know how much research is going on at the moment, but together with the DAI, there might be an option to give a broader audience access to the model, and I think at least
a wonderful case, because on one hand you really have a model, you have an analytical model of understanding what you're doing. That's the intellectual software side of the model. On the other hand, you have this kind of history, and sure.
Yeah,
and even if we should make at least, even if it probably will not fit into the test bed, if we can have a list of things which are, give me your tired, your hungry cases, then we could put that onto the DFG also, saying there are many things which are at the brink of collapsing, or already collapsed but are retrievable, and wouldn't it be a good way to retrieve that via Janus?
Yeah, and I think there is a lot of research options enclosed in the model for free.
Yeah.
So,
the problem is always also that policies, DFG might have its policies, but DFG policies often do not translate to the intellectual levels of the reviewers. And so DFG can have, they do policies, they say, we are part of riding the wave, and they have 90% of their reviewers never saw that and are not capable of understanding what's going on there, and they will shoot down your project, So it's always important to do things that oneself is able to do this, then the AI should do it, and Portico should do it.
We have another question from the back there.
It's about the pure data. In the end, what was published in the end of the pure data? There's this point cloud, but also this point cloud is modeled together out of several original basic scans, and also there I think at least as I can remember, it was only then the end form that was actually published as the pure scan, but in fact it's also there maybe.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think it might be an interesting question for the Janus discussion too. The reasons for having slightly restrictive policy regarding the model and the model data were to keep up the integrity of the model as a reference model. So if people use the data, they should rely on that they use it, that the model they refer to remains the same, that the coordinate system remains the same, for example, in order to compare different approaches or different results in different regions of the building, perhaps. But you're right, of course, the model is an artifact which is built up from 43 partial scans, where the scans were cleaned, where the scans were melded, but the data is, as far as I understood the Cyclone software, the data is preserved within the Cyclone data or the Cyclone data base. So you can separate and you can trace the model building process, at least with the proprietary data of the Cyclone database. But don't know where to start, and how atomic such a history and resolution of data acquisition should be. One thing I found very interesting with the RTI presentation, for example, that there is a technology where the data acquisition process is almost completely transparent, except perhaps what's happening on the chip or within the optics. But there you have a data acquisition process which is, at least to my understanding, much more transparent than the various laser scan technologies.
Yes, this was as well a point which we discussed on Twitter, and if you look at the tweet archive, you see exactly this discussion or this proposal from Catherine, that this might be a solution for the documentation of the acquisition of the data which you undertook. When I said before that I was drinking beer at the Pantheon in my youth, I would suggest that we now start drinking wine and other beverages in the backyard. Felix and Christian used it together and organized the Janus export and transformation. Mr. Furch calls Gerd and asks him why is this project still offline. And I just want to...
We can chime out.
Probably I asked Frederica to ask him.
Yeah, better like this. Don't you? And I want to invite you for the 18th of December, which will be our Christmas lecture, more or less, with a very interesting theme, mapping the catalogue of ships. I can't remember at the moment which it was about, but...
It's in Heim.
Huh?
No, yeah.
Jenny Strauss-Clay. So I hope to see you back here in these rooms on the 18th. If you can't participate, please spread the word that we are having here a very interesting seminar series. And everyone who can't participate at the 18th has to bring a person for a substitute for himself. Okay? So let's have our talks in the back. Thank you very much.